Yo, what is up everybody, Jay the Great here, and welcome back to another Naruto reaction video here today. And today, we have a recommended video by one of you folks, so shout out to you guys for that. This is a video by the great Swagkage, and as you can tell by the title, this is How Naruto Should Have Ended. So folks, I went down the old archives of Swagkage's video catalog, and realized, thanks to one of you guys again, that I never reacted to this specific video in question. Now, when it comes to the illustrious and very revered narrative of Naruto, one of the most criticized aspects of it is the conclusion of the narrative, right? The way that the legendary Madara Uchiha was put down, essentially, right? Madara had this legendary lore established, this all-time great introduction, and extremely dominant display during the war arc, and all that was ripped away from us when Black Zetsu backstabbed him, right? Figuratively and literally as well. So with that, we have a huge point of contention, right? Including myself. I think that Kaguya's introduction was very poorly done, to be quite honest, right? Her character was not one that was remotely revered and or appealing to most of the audience. Sure, she was an extremely powerful antagonist for the protagonists in Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, etc. However, as a character, again, she was not remotely appealing to the audience. In fact, she was quite annoying, right, with the very tactics that worked against her, and the fact that we were ripped away of Madara and given this instead, right? Because as a character, she is not even in the remote same league as Madara. Sure, as far as power, she's ahead of him. Sasuke admits that, but as far as how good of a character she is, she pales in comparison. So I'm actually very intrigued to see what Swag has to say about this and how he thinks Naruto should have ended. But before we begin, I really appreciate it. Hit that like button, turn on bell notifications to stay updated with yours truly. And if you're new and you enjoy, man, you missed the kid, make sure to hit that sub button, because once you do, become part of the family forever. But let's not waste any more time, screen. Let's see what Swag has to say today.
Yo, how's it going, everybody? Swagkage here, and
What
welcome
up?
to today's video. The subject matter should be pretty obvious. The title and thumbnail should have made it quite evident that I'm going to be talking about how I think Naruto should have ended, but let me place some emphasis on the I think part of that sentence. In simpler terms, I don't claim to speak on behalf of everybody. This is my own opinion,
Of course.
at least for the most part. I'm going to base a handful of changes on the fan base's general consensus about a particular plot point or series moment, but for the most part, this is going to be based entirely on my own opinion. Though some disagreements are unavoidable, you're not going to see eye to eye with me on everything that I say throughout this video, but I hope most of you still enjoy it nonetheless. Now, I might be getting a bit ahead of myself. Some of you may be a little confused, so let me briefly outline how I'm going to be laying out this video. First of all, it's a follow-up to a video I posted last week talking about how I feel Naruto's war arc could have been improved. Now, you don't have to go watch the video by any means. As a matter of fact, I don't really think you're missing out on much if you don't go watch it, but maybe if you do check it out, it'll give you a better idea of the frame of mind that I'm approaching this from. So if you want to go watch it first, I guess I'll leave a link in the description, or you can just go find the video on my channel, but that doesn't really matter. The main reason I brought it up is because I'm going to be picking up where I left off in that video, which is the point at which Madara arrived on the battlefield. Now, the thumbnail, and I guess the title to some extent, may have led you to believe that I'm going to be strictly discussing the very end of Naruto, with Kaguya, Naruto versus Sasuke, the Sage of Six Paths, and all of that. And I will get to covering that stuff, so don't worry, but in order to do that, I'm going to have to start by tackling all the stuff that came directly before it. As a matter of fact, that's the only reason I made last week's video about the war arc in the first place, because the ideal ending that I have in mind for Naruto requires making a lot of narrative changes starting from as early as the beginning of the war arc. And since I already made an entire video about the war arc, I think it only makes sense for me to start talking about how I think the final arc could have been different. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. Without wasting any more time on this incredibly lengthy intro segment, let's just get right into the topic at hand and start discussing how Naruto's final arc and how its ending could have been better. So just like I said in last week's video, the overall story structure is going to remain the same. I really like the vision that Kishimoto had in mind for the end of the series. He just made a lot of really bad calls as an author, and it resulted in a final product that wasn't nearly as good as it should have been. Now, the first sign of this sloppiness is the insane amount of ass pulls, contradictions, deus ex machina, and things of that nature. This shit is fucking omnipresent throughout Naruto's final arc. And now, look, it's possible to justify a lot of this stuff by doing some pretty arduous mental gymnastics, but first of all, that should never be expected of a reader, and second of all, that only applies to some of these examples. The others are just straight up plot holes or contrivances. At best, they're extremely convenient coincidences, and then there are also just plenty of instances of really bad or stupid writing. Let me provide a list of examples of
Izanami. Naruto. Yeah, that's contradictory. I agree. Green dye. Occupy power without his eyes. Yep. Mr. Type can't tell a shadow clone apart from Honora. Stones of Naruto. Sage 6 path appears. Yeah, exactly that last one. Convenient, right? So. Swagkage. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, that was a little weird when he said Obito was the coolest guy after everything he's done.
That's a lot to go over. I also neglected to mention a handful of other things, like how Obito arbitrarily opted not to use his Rinnegan abilities, probably because Kishimoto just decided it would make him too powerful. Like, I get it, apparently they consume a lot of chakra, but Obito was casually controlling 6-tailed beasts at once. Plus, he didn't even start using his Rinnegan powers after he became Jubito, so what fucking gives? Another example is how Sakura got this miraculous fucking power-up that propelled her from maybe like high tuning, low jonin level to above Kage level, and it didn't really end up amounting to dick bubkiss. She didn't accomplish diddly squat with it. Or the fact that Obito had half of his body crushed underneath the weight of a cave, but his Sharingan was left perfectly intact, and Madara was still able to save him somehow. And don't even get me started on how Naruto talked no jutsu to Obito. That made me incredibly upset, and I could probably spend an entire video ranting about that alone. Anyway, let's move on. I've been talking about these issues for quite a long time now, and I think it's about time for me to start discussing how I think they can be fixed. So first of all, I don't really have any problems with how Madara was handled, at least not at the beginning of the arc. His battle against the 4th Division and against the 5 Kage is totally fine, but the battles against Obito and Kabuto both need to be completely overhauled. So let's start with Kabuto. Alright, so first off, Itachi doesn't really need to be there, and at the very least, he should not be carrying the entire battle. Now, I know a lot of people, myself included, really did like seeing Itachi and Sasuke fight alongside one another for the first time ever, but Sasuke didn't really do anything in the fight. And again, Itachi's presence isn't really required. Like, you just have to nerf Kabuto, and then Sasuke would be able to take him on 1v1. It'd be a much better way to show what Sasuke is capable of with his EMS, because we never really got a good introductory battle to serve that purpose, because as soon as he started fighting seriously against the Ten Tails and then eventually Jubito, all of his feats were kind of overshadowed by Naruto's. So the point is, either don't have Itachi there, or have Sasuke contribute just as much as Itachi did in the fight. Second thing, and the most important thing, is Izanami needs to be taken out completely. This was a really stupid jutsu, extremely overpowered insta-kill move that Kabuto had no way to defend himself against. It was like the worst kind of Deus Ex Machina, came out of nowhere, and when Itachi beat Kabuto with it, the victory didn't feel earned. Now, obviously, Sasuke and Itachi can't kill Kabuto. If they do that, he can't release the Edo Tensei, and that would leave the allied shinobi forces in a bit of a pickle. But a very easy way to force Kabuto to undo the jutsu would be having Itachi, if you decide to keep him around, of course, press him so hard that he has to undo Edo Tensei in order to survive. Have Sasuke and Itachi back Kabuto into a corner through teamwork, where he's about to get pierced by the Totsuka blade, and is thereby forced to release the jutsu in order to get Itachi off the battlefield. This would also be a much better way to lead Sasuke and Kabuto to the battlefield, without having Kabuto go through that really stupid Izanami self-discovery process, and without having Sasuke forced to talk to the Hokage. Obviously, his conversation with Itachi could help change his worldview a little bit, make him a bit less hell-bent on destroying Konoha or something like that. But if Kabuto found out that Madara had resisted the Edo Tensei release, he'd probably head straight to the battlefield after finding this out, in order to attempt to seal Madara himself, and Sasuke would follow him in hot pursuit. Now, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but to me, this sounds a lot more organic than what happened in the original series. Anyway, this brings me to my next point. Orochimaru should not come...
Alright, so I definitely want to discuss a few things that have already been iterated by Swagkage. So, I'm glad he said that the war arc, in general, consists of many contradictory ideas and events. Ones that he didn't really touch up upon are how powerful some of the Edo Tenseis are, or most likely are. Right? For example, Haku and Zabuza are able to arbitrarily compete with Kakashi. They were competing with the Part 1 iteration of Kakashi, who was far inferior to the iteration of Kakashi we see in the war arc. So I'd certainly deem that as a contradictory establishment of power from point A to point B. I certainly see that. Another example, Kimimaro and Chiyo. There's an implication, at least in the manga, that they were able to even compete with KCM1 Naruto, even if it is just a clone. That's extremely contradictory, as Chiyo is inferior to Sasori, who to some degree is arbitrarily above the Sannin with the Hanzo and the Kazekage scaling, but is certainly not in the rare air of KCM Naruto, who is in the rare air of his father and the Raikage, at least in terms of speed. That is extremely contradictory. So for these individuals in a lower caliber to even remotely contend with someone of KCM1 Naruto's caliber is quite contradictory as well. Now, as far as the other points that he listed and currently discussed, I agree with many of them, like Madara being able to use ocular powers with no eyes. How can he use ocular powers when his ocularity is non-existent? He doesn't possess eyes whatsoever. So how does that make any sense, right? How does it make any sense? That's certainly a Deus Ex Machina. I agree with Swag there. And I agree with most of the things that he listed out, most of the aspects that he listed out. Now, when it comes to the Itachi intervention with Sage Kabuto, I actually tend to disagree. Because I think, now this might be just my own emotional appeal playing a factor here, I actually believe Itachi was the one to end Sage Kabuto's Edo Tensei reign, essentially. Because, rationally, Sasuke would lose an eye if he had to use Izanami, and I wouldn't say it's very in character for Kabuto to be willing to just concede. I honestly believe he'd be willing to die for his cause, essentially. Meaning that putting him in a corner would most likely not result in him undoing the Edo Tensei Jutsu. I probably would have had more of a problem with that than what we have in the original narrative. So I think Itachi's presence was more necessary than not. And I believe that the way it went was alright. I do agree Sasuke should have contributed more so we could have seen what he is capable of with the EMS now implanted in his eye sockets, right? What he can do as a shinobi. Because Itachi did carry that battle. He certainly did, and he ended the battle as well with the Izanami. Now, as far as the Izanami, is it a Deus Ex Machina to some extent? Absolutely. It certainly is. I didn't have a problem with it. I don't think it was the worst ass pull, quote-unquote, that I've ever seen. I think it just speaks testament to Itachi's ability and to the legendary abilities that the Uchiha have. So I didn't really have a problem with that. And for the most part, I'm okay with how that went. So I had to commentate on that and give my thoughts so far, but let's continue.
Back. That didn't make sense at all. That was really weird. He was sealed inside of Itachi's Susanoo gourd by the Totsuka blade, but somehow he had chakra residue on a curse mark somewhere and was able to, like, crawl out. Like, at best, that wasn't Orochimaru. That was some kind of weird Senjutsu clone or something. Anyway, by extension, if Orochimaru doesn't come back, then the first four Hokage can't either. And look, I know a lot of people probably aren't going to agree, but it didn't make any sense for there to be this Reaper release mask just lying around in the Hidden Leaf Village that nobody knew about but Orochimaru, especially because Kabuto wanted to add the first four Hokage to his arsenal, but he said he couldn't because they were all trapped inside the belly of the Reapers. So if Orochimaru knew about this, surely Kabuto would as well. There's just a whole lot of reasons why this plot device doesn't make sense, and so even though it's at the expense of a lot of really cool moments, the first four Hokage, they don't need to return. By extension, Naruto should not only be the Jinchuriki of half of the Nine Tails, he should definitely have the whole thing, because having Minato, like, split it in half just so that he can have Biju mode, it was very bizarre to say the least. Alright, so next up, Obito. Now, he is a lot more difficult to handle because of one thing in particular, that being he completes the 10 Tails without either Gyuki or Kurama. And now, this is kind of dumb because it shits on the entire war arc by invalidating it. It just begs the question, okay then, if it was that simple, why did he even declare war against the allied shinobi forces? He could have just used the tentacle that B left behind when Sasuke was sent to capture him, and I'm sure he could have gathered some residual chakra some other way. Like, there's no way you can tell me it would have been easier to wipe out Naruto plus all of the other ninja ninja on the planet than it would have been for him to just capture Naruto by
Right.
himself, right?
That's a fair
the war
point.
serves no purpose if you make it this easy for him to complete the 10 tails. So he has to extract Gyuki from Killer Bee and add it to the Ghetto Mazo, which is thankfully much easier now that he's in possession of the Rinnegan, and he can just use the chains to call the Biju back into the statue. And this would be cool because you'd get a really emotional death scene. You know, Naruto had been bonding with Bee throughout the entire war arc, but Naruto's, he's much tougher because realistically, Obito would need to get Kurama from Naruto as well, leaving him without his Biju mode, the thing that he had been working to acquire for the whole arc, and also he'd die. Now, you could easily reverse Naruto's death using Kisho Tensei. This is the jutsu that Chio used to bring Gaara back from the dead. When the exact same thing happened to him, he had his Biju extracted from his body. But the problem of Naruto not being able to access his Biju mode still exists. And it would definitely be a huge slap in the face to everybody to see Naruto work to master this form for the entire arc, only to have his ability to use it stripped away from him, at least temporarily. Though I will say, this opens the door for a very nice emotional moment between Naruto and Kurama. He finally manages to befriend the Nine Tails, and as soon as he does, it gets ripped right out of his body. Now, the way you could go about having the Nine Tails extracted from Naruto would be a battle between he and Madara. I'm pretty sure Madara could use the Rinnegan rods to immobilize Naruto, at which point Obito would be able to extract the Nine Tails and subsequently form the 10 Tails. Now, I need to back up a bit because if all of this happens, it raises the question, well, okay, then who's supposed to bring Naruto back to life? And the only person who I think would feasibly be able to use Kisho Tensei is Tsunade. So she'd have to give her life in exchange for Naruto.
Agreed.
Now, this would create a really bleak fucking tone for the rest of the arc because Bee just died, Naruto nearly died, and Tsunade had to die in order to bring him back to life. Kurama's gone. You just have all these really great character moments. You know, Sakura having to come to terms with the fact that Tsunade's dead. Now, I'm not sure how Tsunade would get to the battlefield after being cut in half by Madara. I'm pretty sure Katsuyu would heal her the same way she did in the main series, but it would take a really long time. So Naruto might be out of commission for a while. But what I think would happen is the 10 Tails would get completed, and like in the main series, the allied shinobi forces would show up right after this. Everyone would notice Naruto's corpse lying on the floor, and Sakura would immediately volunteer to head to the location where the 5 Kage were last seen so that she could heal Tsunade and see if Tsunade could do anything to heal Naruto. At this point, Tsunade would be like, yeah, the only thing I can do is give my life in exchange for his, and he's a much more valuable asset to the team now than I am. This would be really cool because Sakura would have to come to terms with the fact that her mentor is dead, but on the flip side, she'd probably be very eager to take up Tsunade's mantle, and at that point, she activates the Byakugo, and it buffs her way more than it did in the main series. I'm talking like putting her at sub-Naruto and Sasuke levels. It would be really awesome to see her finally accomplish some shit just like she did in the battle against Sasori, and it'd be really easy to justify to the audience too because her chakra control, which is the thing responsible for her insane level of strength, has been being hyped up since the beginning of the Land of Waves arc. Maybe not sub-Naruto and Sasuke level, but I really want Sakura to be able to contribute. That's all that matters to me. Also, Tsunade's death would be really fitting because Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura are the 3 students of the 3 Sannin, respectively, and seeing them reunite like this right after the death of the last of the 3 Sannin would be really cool. Some nice symbolic shit, you know? Now, one thing I forgot to go over is the backstory between Obito and Madara. First of all, don't have Kakashi unlock the Mangekyo Sharingan after killing Rin. That was dumb. Just have him train to unlock it like he initially did in the main series before the retcon. 2, figure out some other fucking way for Madara to save Obito from the boulder. I mean, I'm kind of out of ideas, but here's the thing. I don't want to change Tobi to be a different character because I associate him way too heavily with Obito now, and I do like Obito for what he is, but something needs to be done so that Obito's rescue doesn't seem nearly as asinine. Madara could use Rene Rebirth, but that wouldn't really make sense because Nagato was currently in possession of his Rinnegan, and it just wouldn't make any chronological sense for this not to be the case because I'm pretty sure Nagato awakened the Rinnegan in the 2nd Shinobi World War. Obito got crushed by the boulder in the 3rd, so Rene Rebirth can't have, but Kishimoto could probably fucking think of something. Anyway, on that note, Obito shouldn't mention him, like, at all. There are a lot of people under the impression that he started the entire 4th War because of her, and granted, he does say that that's not the reason, but I can't blame people for not believing that, because, look, Obito mentions Rin quite a few times.
Yeah, he does.
because as a matter of fact, she's one of the first things he brings up after he's unmasked. Like, immediately, he just says to Kakashi, "You let Rin die," and talking about her this much, flashing back to her this much, it gives the readers an impression that Obito started the whole war just because he was upset
simp energy.
he didn't
Simp
get to
energy.
put his dick inside
That's
of her.
the
So that can still be the
sort of
straw
aura
that
that
broke the
it's
camel's back, seeing
spewing
his
out.
best friend kill the girl he's in love with, but nothing more. He shouldn't still be mentioning it like 25 fucking years down the road. Anyway, moving on to Jubito and the Ten Tails itself, I think that Obito and Madara can still become the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, though I think the process for how they just absorb the entire fucking Jubi needs to be elaborated on. I think a really unique method of doing it would be having Obito or Madara use the Rinnegan to take control of somebody from the allied shinobi forces and have them perform Reaper Death Seal or something of that nature. Now, admittedly, you need somebody pretty fucking strong to seal the entire Ten Tails into somebody, but it makes more sense than them just arbitrarily absorbing the Jubi and becoming its Jinchuriki somehow. I mean, I don't really care how it's done as long as it's elaborated upon. Make becoming the Jinchuriki an actually interesting process. Maybe make it something that all of the members of the allied shinobi forces are in theory able to do, but don't want to because of the point I'm about to bring up next, which is the fact that the Jubi should be impossible to tame. At full power, the Nine Tails nearly broke free of Naruto's body, so I don't see why the fucking Ten Tails wouldn't be able to do the same to Obito and Madara. So the difficulty of keeping the Ten Tails in check would be enough to offset Obito's ability to use Kamui, I think. Like, he'd be so preoccupied trying to keep this thing from murdering him from the inside that I don't think the ability to phase through objects would make him too threatening. I know it was done as a balancing mechanic in the original series, and it was one that probably needed to be implemented, but making it extremely difficult for Obito to focus on combat due to the fact that he constantly has to suppress the Ten Tails is a pretty good alternative, especially because his inability to use Kamui didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Eventually, the Ten Tails would break out of his body due to the pressure being put on him by the rest of the allied shinobi forces fighting him all at once. I mean, that would certainly make a lot more sense than Naruto performing Talk no Jutsu and using a moment of weakness created by that jutsu to tear through Obito and rip the Jubi out that way. Regardless, after the Jubi breaks free, Madara becomes its Jinchuriki, thinking that he has a much better chance of taming it. Of course, in the meantime, he'd have to get Obito to use Rene Rebirth, and now this is a problem, because I think the fact that Obito survived both a tailed beast extraction and casting Rene Rebirth, two things that have been individually responsible for multiple deaths throughout the series, by themselves, again, emphasis on individually, is really dumb. You could probably explain it away by having Madara attach Black Zetsu to Obito's body the same way he did in the main series, and artificially pump chakra into his body to keep him alive that way, because in this ending, Zetsu still belongs to Madara, not fucking Kaguya, so Madara can transmit chakra through him. Then Obito uses Rene Rebirth, and then uses whatever sealing jutsu he did earlier to seal the Ten Tails into Madara's body. Madara would also retrieve both of his Rinnegan much more easily, since I think it would be reasonable to assume he could use Zetsu to suppress Obito's chakra and keep him from using Kamui to go into the other dimension. That way he wouldn't have to follow him there by taking Kakashi's eye, which was also really silly. Then he would tear through everybody, Guy would get his moment in the spotlight, and the guy would stay dead because, trust me, his sacrifice would have much more emotional impact than keeping him alive would.
I agree.
But
That
this brings me to what the fuck are Naruto and Sasuke gonna do? Because at this point, I feel like half of the allied shinobi forces would be dead, and Naruto and Sasuke would both be on the brink of death. Because, look, all Naruto would have access to is Sage Mode now. He's not really gonna be able to do much against the Jubi Jinchuriki Madara, and EMS Sasuke would have the exact same issue. But I don't like the Sage of Six Paths appearing out of nowhere with no explanation. That was a huge head scratcher for me, and yet at the same time, I do like the powers that he gave Naruto and Sasuke access to. So here's how I think I would alter the Sage of Six Paths appearance. He would still show up. It would be done through this weird, unorthodox variation of the jutsu that Minato and Kushina used to seal themselves in Naruto's psyche, where they would come forth whenever a specified event or series of events took place. Something like that would allow the Sage of Six Paths to either appear in the psyche of both Naruto and Sasuke, or appear as an illusion on the battlefield, or like send his chakra to Earth or something. You know, what he could do is a certain amount of time after the revival of the Ten Tails, he could have a seal somewhere that goes off and projects his chakra somewhere into the world, where he'd be able to meet with Naruto and Sasuke and give them some of his power. And this is where I think Naruto would get his Kyuubi chakra mode back, because the Sage of Six Paths could remark that his Nine Tails chakra mode was very similar to Asura's three-headed avatar, and he'd be like, well, I can give you an ability just like that, no need to worry. On that note, they should not be fucking reincarnates of Indra and Ashura. That was actually the dumbest thing that Kishimoto did while writing Naruto. It completely shit on the entire premise that the story first had. It took Naruto from an underdog to the reincarnation of Jesus, and I mean that borderline literally. That whole plot point, that needs to be dismissed. Naruto and Sasuke can still get the powers though, and you can still draw a lot of parallels between the two of them and Indra and Ashura, but you don't have to make them actual fucking reincarnates of the two. The two of them would then go on to fight Madara in an extremely lengthy battle where Madara would have the upper hand for pretty much the entire time because he's way too overpowered, but he, like Obito, would have to fight against the Ten Tails breaking free from his body. Eventually, he'd succumb to the same fate as Obito when Naruto and Sasuke are both on the brink of dying. The Ten Tails would break free, and Naruto and Sasuke would see an opportunity to seal it away. Now, this is where I think you could set up a lot of cool things that already happened in the ending with much better explanations. So first of all, now that they're both equipped to handle this thing, Naruto and Sasuke would react to completely different ways to seeing the Ten Tails. Sasuke's first instinct would be to either kill it or seal it away, whereas Naruto would want to try and use his Six Paths powers to split it back into the 9 Biju, especially if he'd just established a friendship with Kurama right before he'd been extracted from him. Now this would help strengthen the foundation of the conflict that goes on between Naruto and Sasuke later on in the arc. It would give Sasuke a much better direct reference to draw from as to why he thinks Naruto isn't fit to be Hokage, and it'd also give them a much more visible thing to fight over than just their philosophy, which you hadn't really gotten to see any of from Sasuke in the first place. It just sort of came out of nowhere. Also, this could be a much better way to justify Kaguya's appearance. Trying to fuck around with the Ten Tails by using the creation of all things, the same jutsu that the Sage of Six Paths used to initially split it into the 9 Biju, might end up leading Naruto to accidentally send Kaguya's conscious back to the forefront of the Ten Tails' mind, allowing her to take over, and through some kind of transformation jutsu or something, compress her body back into its original form. Now, I say with a transformation jutsu because I think Kaguya's transition into the Ten Tails should have been permanent. It didn't really make a whole lot of sense for her to take Madara's body over and then suddenly have access to her regular body again. Like, she became the Ten Tails as a consequence of eating the fruit of the Shinju tree, and that's how it should have stayed. The only reason she didn't initially transform back, I thought anyway, was because over the course of becoming the Ten Tails, she was slowly driven insane, but regaining her consciousness and awareness would fix this problem. She'd still be batshit crazy, but she'd at least be a bit more composed, and I think she needs to be a lot more composed and a lot more intelligent than she was in the main series. Also, on the subject of Kaguya, don't tie Black Zetsu to her. That was a dumb plot twist. I think it was perfectly fine for him to be the manifestation of Madara as well, and him writing all of Shinobi history was really stupid too. Now, like I said, Kaguya doesn't need to show up, but personally, I really like her design, and I think that given the ending I'm going for, where the Ten Tails breaks out of Madara and Naruto and Sasuke don't actually beat him, it would be a lot more satisfying for there to be an actual threatening enemy that isn't only defeated because of the fact that they're unable to control their power. Naruto and Sasuke would then go to take Kaguya out. No perfect Susanoo on Kakashi's behalf or any of that. Sakura could still get involved, and Kakashi could still too, considering he still has access to Obito's Sharingan since Madara never popped it out. Though I think I would restrict Kaguya's abilities, keep her from being a fucking dimension hopper. That way she can't trap Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi in another dimension so that the Sage of Six Paths has to summon every Kage ever from the dead to use a summoning jutsu to bring them back. Like, that was really dumb. Again, Kaguya doesn't have to show up. I just think that it would feel better as a reader, and it would make the ending feel less incomplete if after the Ten Tails broke free from Madara, we had an actual threat. You know, it would just feel really empty if Naruto and Sasuke didn't really get the win there, and then nothing else followed. Right. Regardless, directly after the last antagonist, Naruto and Sasuke have their little scuffle. Though Sasuke wouldn't have the extra insight he received from Hashirama, he would still probably have his resolve shifted a bit, thanks to his conversation and meeting with Itachi. He could also have a lengthy conversation with the Sage of Six Paths, asking him to tell him the truth about everything that's gone on throughout all of Shinobi history, since if the Sage of Six Paths is capable of summoning stuff to the real world, despite the fact that he died like 1,000 years ago, then surely he'd be able to tell Sasuke about a bunch of major historical developments in the Shinobi world. This would lead Sasuke to develop his plan, but in my opinion, Sasuke's plan shouldn't be to unite the world against him, but rather just to rule as an authoritarian dictator with an iron fist. A secondary consequence of doing this could be to
I'll get my
unite
thoughts
everybody against
after
him.
the video,
I'm pretty
folks.
sure
I
that's
definitely
what
have
he
some
was
thoughts on this.
going for in the original manga, as a matter of fact. But I think much more emphasis should be placed on the fact that he plans to snuff out all crime, sort of like Kira from Death Note, since nobody alive would have any chance of taking him out. Naruto and Sasuke have their final battle, then the series comes to an end. Madara and Obito don't get redeemed. They don't fucking be like, well, you guys were right all along. The infinite Tsukuyomi doesn't turn people into Zetsu. And I think that after Naruto becomes Hokage, it shouldn't be established that the world has achieved true peace. He's still trying to search for the answer, and even though the 5 great nations have allied with one another, there still need to be problems brewing amongst them. This would give Naruto and the rest of the characters a good chance to reflect on Madara's goal and ask themselves if the infinite Tsukuyomi really was all that bad. As for ships and stuff, I'm not really gonna get into all of that. Personally, I would have liked to see Sasuke kill Sakura, but I don't really mind the two of them getting together in the end either. Also,
that would have been
the
more
series
sense
should
than them getting
actually end
together.
here. I'd really prefer if Boruto didn't have...
Alright, there's the video, folks. And I definitely have some thoughts on it for sure. So, essentially, I agree with some aspects of change that Swag proposed, and I disagree with some aspects of change. So, let's start with the ones I disagree with. I disagree that, like I said earlier, Itachi shouldn't be present during the Sage Kabuto altercation. I do think he should be present. It makes more sense rationally. That way, Sasuke doesn't have to risk losing an eye to use Izanami, etc. And it also just illuminates Itachi's caliber. Again, that's probably my own emotional appeal playing a factor here, but the way Itachi was involved in the war, I think, was very well done. Now, another aspect I disagree with is the Ten Tails ripping itself out of the Jinchuriki hosts. I don't think that's the best way to approach battle. If anything, it takes away the suspense of the battle, because if we know that the Ten Tails would just break out of anybody's control or soul, then what's the point of becoming Jinchuriki, right? The battles wouldn't mean anything. Even if you weren't to battle these guys, eventually the Ten Tails would break out. I don't agree that's the method that Madara should be defeated, with the Ten Tails simply just ripping itself out of him. That would defeat the purpose of Naruto and Sasuke fighting Madara. So I disagree with that as well. Now, besides that, I believe I agree with most of what Swagkage said. Like Jubito being not Takno Jutsu'd. I agree with that. That was a very trivial way of him being defeated, and it defeated the purpose of the battle in the first place, right? Now, Obito's mental anguish makes sense, right? Because when he sees Naruto, he sees a parallel of what he once was and also of what he would have become if he were to be an ally to Konoha in the shinobi world, right? That's basically who Naruto is. He is what Obito would have became. So the mental anguish makes sense. But what I would have proposed for the war to make more sense is Madara re-embedding his ideology into Obito. I would have liked to see more dialogue between them. Maybe Madara acknowledges the mental anguish and says, hey, remember why we're doing this. Remember that life is this cyclical and torturous endeavor that will never truly be fixed unless we intervene and erase the current natural order of things. If you would have told Obito all of that and given him this speech, this very impactful dialogue, then that would have made sense, right? That would have vanquished the opportunity for Obito to be Takano Jutsu'd, right? They would have had to legitimately defeat Obito, or maybe Madara just rips the Ten Tails out of Obito himself or something of that nature. Or perhaps we would have seen Madara versus Jubito, right? It was Sage Mode Madara versus Jubito. That would have been interesting as well. So I believe that would have been a better way to approach it, right? And when it comes to Madara, I think that he had to be defeated in a difficult way. Now, I agree with Swag when he says the way in which Madara was removed from the equation was bad. It was very bad. One of the worst writing decisions in the entire narrative, right? Was Black Zetsu backstabbing him so casually and easily. That was insane and absurd. The degree of absurdity of that event will always be exponential. It's ridiculous how absurd that was. I agree with that, and I do agree the conclusion should have been different. Now, to me, a good proposal to the conclusion of the war would have been Madara being the final villain, and being one hell of a villain. Perhaps he gets more powerful than what we could have even imagined. Now, when it comes to the Infinite Tsukuyomi, maybe there could have been this instantiation of immunity for Sasuke and Naruto having 6 path powers. Maybe Kishimoto could have wrote in, hey, they're immune because of this, and maybe then they could have gotten out of the Susanoo and fought Madara. Now, I wouldn't even have minded Sakura being caught in it or Kakashi. I would have been okay with Naruto and Sasuke being the only ones immune, maybe because they have 6 path powers, and combating Madara for the sake of the shinobi world, right? Everyone's caught in the Infinite Tsukuyomi. Naruto and Sasuke are the only ones left standing, and they tell each other, hey, we have to bring him down. If not, the world's done. The world is over. The shinobi world will come to an end. Right? That would have been a suspenseful and thrilling conclusion rather than Black Zetsu backstabbing Madara and dumbass Kaguya coming out and just being such a threat, yet extremely rudimentary in her intelligence. Right? That was just not the way to conclude that. So that would have been more suspenseful, and I think that battle should have came down to the wire. Maybe Naruto and Sasuke are damn near on death's door when they defeat Madara, and it's one hell of a drawn-out battle. That's the conclusion I would have liked. Right? Honestly, the Otsutsuki could have waited till Boruto. They didn't need to introduce Otsutsuki yet. That's another caliber of power that Naruto and Sasuke can't compete with, or shouldn't have been able to compete with until Boruto, where they're adults and their skills and abilities are more refined and amplified. That would have made more sense to me. But overall, Swag has the right idea. From my subjective lens, again, like he said at the beginning of this video, there's no way to have everyone agree on this. There's no such thing as a perfect consensus to the conclusion of how the war arc should have ended, right? But for the most part, from my subjective lens, Swag approached this correctly. As far as the 4 Hokage, I do think their presence is a little trivial, right? If you think about rationally what they did, they helped slightly. They helped with the 4 Crimson Red barrier to contain the Tentos and Jubito, etc. However, their presence isn't much needed anyway. Hashirama is even inferior to Jubito, right? Their presence wasn't really necessary. I think it caused more problems than not for the fandom. For the hardcore fans that do power scaling, it created a ton of problems. People legitimately believe that Tobirama is relative to Jubito because he was able to tag a mentally fatigued and a mentally nerfed Jubito. Some people legitimately believe that he's relative to him, which is absolutely absurd considering how he was defeated in his career. Kinkaku and Genkaku defeated him and company. So, to use this small substrata of empirical evidence to suggest that Tobirama is relative to Jubito isn't remotely appropriate. That's why I think the 4 Hokage's presence caused more issues than not. It caused more issues than not, to be honest. And I agree with Swag. I don't think their presence was necessary. I don't. So, also, I agree with how they came to be reanimated. It was also a little intriguing because, like Swag said, how could nobody else in all Konoha noticed this magical mask that can open the stomach of the Reaper Death Cell just laying around? Kabuto wasn't even aware of it. So how is Orochimaru just magically aware of it and Kabuto isn't? So I agree with him there as well. Orochimaru's return was very, very strange. All that was extremely bizarre. I agree. It was a very convenient storytelling. Very convenient. So that's my thoughts on the video, folks. The war arc certainly could have been better. The war arc, I would say, isn't absurdly awful by any means. The conclusion is awful, but the overall narrative of the war arc isn't awful. I do think it was more good than not. I think the narrative was appealing enough. It was intriguing enough. It appealed to a large majority of the Naruto fandom, regardless of the strange, contradictory ideas that were thrown around, the contradictory events when considering how powerful someone was originally compared to now as an Edo. Regardless of all that, the narrative was still a good narrative, and Naruto overall as a narrative is still an all-time great piece of literature that will live on in the minds of millions to possibly hundreds of millions of people for the foreseeable future. So that's my thoughts on the video, my thoughts on the war arc, and again, great video by Swag. Swag pointed out some great details that I believe a lot of people don't even consider, and called them out for the absurdity of them, the contradictory nature of them, etc. It was very well done by Swag, and I'm glad that, again, you guys recommended it. But that's going to wrap it up, folks. Make sure to leave your comments in the comment section below. What are your thoughts? Do you think the war arc was perfect? Do you think it was extremely awful? Are you in the middle somewhere? Whatever it is, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll catch you in the next one. This is J3 signing out. Peace.